1.3 billion years ago, when on Earth there was little more than single-cell life, in a distant galaxy, there was an astronomical event of unimaginable power. It was the merger of two black holes, the collision of two black holes, and it sent into the universe a pulse of something called gravitational waves. Gravitational waves are how gravity propagates throughout the universe. Seen in this simulation by the SXS collaboration using LIGO data, the black holes are revolving around each other in a death spiral. They might have been doing this for millions of years, perhaps a billion years, no one really knows. But they're stirring up space-time around them, and the light from distant stars is being warped by the effect of gravity. In the last fraction of a second of the system's life, the black holes are moving at over half the speed of light, and they finally merge to form a bigger black hole. And in the process, send out this pulse of gravitational waves, distortions in the medium of space throughout the universe. Now, fast forwarding from 1.3 billion years to just a little over 100 years ago, creatures had evolved on Earth to not only look at themselves and try to understand themselves, but think about gravity and try to understand it. And the best at this was Einstein. Einstein, in 1915, arrived at his final formulation of his general theory of relativity, a theory of gravity, which makes predictions like the existence of black holes and the Big Bang, and that gravitational radiation, gravitational waves, are the way gravity moves around the universe. You know, this is a tech conference, and we want to think about applications of pure research. So if we all have our smartphones on us, and we can locate ourselves to about a meter on Earth. If we didn't have Einstein's theory of relativity, if we only had Newtonian gravity, Newton's theory, we'd be off by 7 miles per day on our cell phone. You have to calculate the effect of the gravity on the radio waves that come from satellites in order to make GPS work. So pure research like this just has to get done. So one of the predictions from Einstein's relativity was gravitational waves. What are they? Well, consider these 10 rings in space. They're floating in space, and a gravitational wave is coming down the axis of these rings. Space itself is squeezed and expanded. First on one axis, squeezed and expanded on the other, and then vice versa, expanded and squeezed on the other. And so it's deforming something that looks like a circle into an oval. That's the effect of a passage of a gravitational wave. We don't actually need a ring detector to find them. You can make an L-shaped detector and look for the changing lengths of the arms of an L-shaped detector, and that's the signature for the passage of a gravitational wave. And you'll see that's what we've done. In 1972, Ray Weiss of MIT proposed that we use an interferometer to detect gravitational waves, where you send laser light in to something called a beam splitter, which sends the light down 2 arms. So you have an intrinsic L-shaped detector. Before that, people were using bar detectors to look for gravitational waves. Joe Weber and people in the 60s had cylinders of metal that they suspended, and those cylinders were supposed to ring like a bell when a gravitational wave passed through. They didn't find gravitational waves. Ray set down the equations that describe a LIGO-like interferometer in '72, including the noise that you'd have to beat in order to make a working gravitational wave detector. You had to eliminate seismic motion, the motion of the ground. You had to eliminate or minimize the thermal noise, the motion, the Brownian motion of the atoms in mirrors. You had to reduce the quantum noise in laser and a host of other noise sources. So that's the detector in principle. Here's what it does. You send laser light onto a beam splitter, which sends light down the arms, and if the arm lengths change, you read that out at that square output port. That's a photodiode. So here, light is an electromagnetic wave. It goes, half the light goes down one arm, half the light goes down the other. Those electromagnetic waves reflect off the end mirrors. Those waves march back, combine at the beam splitter, and so what is sent to the output port is the sum of the light from the 2 arms. And first, the light cancels. So right now, the output port is dark. But if the arm lengths change for any reason, including the passage of a gravitational wave, that leaks some light onto the output port. And so that's the signature for the passage of a gravitational wave. The arm lengths change. You read out this signal on photodiodes at the output, and all of the astrophysics of the source is encoded in the light on those photodetectors. Easy, right? No problem. So in practice, it's a really difficult experiment. This is LIGO. On the left is one of our 2 detectors. That's LIGO Washington, LIGO Handford. That's the observatory that I'm the head of. And on the right is the Louisiana detector, our second detector. Together, they operate in tandem as one large observatory. The group that works on this is called the LIGO Scientific Collaboration. It's 1,000 people worldwide. And it is paid for by the National Science Foundation in the US with contributions from foreign agencies. And we also work with an Italian-French collaboration called Virgo, which has a 3-kilometer detector in Pisa. Our detectors in the States are 4 kilometers long on a side. That's defined by 2 large vacuum tubes that we suck all the air out of in order to allow the laser light to move unimpeded. And at the end of these arms are mirrors that reflect the laser light back. There's a host of technology that makes the detectors work. If I distill it down to the 2 things you have to do, they're shown on this slide. On the left is the laser, an infrared laser. You can't even see it with your eyes. It has to be a pure color laser in order to see gravitational waves. And on the right are the mirrors. They have to be extremely still. Those are the 2 main things you have to do. There's lots more than that. But let's start with the mirrors. In order to detect the passage of gravitational waves, we have to, if you consider the ground motion and the motion of the mirror, we have to suppress the ground motion by a factor of 10 billion before you have a chance to see gravitational waves. So that pink-looking optic is suspended by glass fibers to another optic that you can't even see because it's clear, to a table, suspended by wires to another table, which is suspended to a table, another table, and then finally a hydraulic system that suppresses noise. And these kind of noises that they're suppressing are things like the tides. The Earth is being distorted by the motions of the sun and the moon and relative to the Earth. And so you have to suppress that. Or waves beating against the continental shelf cause the continent to ring just a little, and you have to suppress that. Or earthquakes or trucks. There's all kinds of noises that you suppress to make the mirrors very still. And then the laser, if you're going to sample the cavity of the interferometer, you have to use pure color light in order so that you don't confuse the noise in the laser with the noise in the arms. So it has to be pure in frequency, it has to be pure in amplitude, and it has to be pure in mode. So those are the keys, the real keys to gravitational wave detection. There's a host of other technology involved. The entire system is a control loop, like elaborate noise-canceling headphones. The detector runs at an operating point, and all those motions and excursions and laser frequencies and angles, they all have to be suppressed in an elaborate control system. There's auxiliary laser systems, like the green one you see, which is about controlling the interferometer. There's electronic readouts, both in vacuum and out of vacuum. Everything has to be done in a clean way, so particulates don't get on the optics. It's a hard experiment to do, but it's worth it in the end. And it's not just actually interferometer technology that you have to get right. You have to have the computing systems, the clusters that analyze the data, and you have to know about Einstein's theory of relativity through numerical relativity, simulations with supercomputers of systems like 2 black holes colliding. All of this is the technology that makes the interferometer go. Now, LIGO ran a phase called initial LIGO from 2000 to 2010. And we made searches with our first generation of detectors, and we didn't find anything. So in 2010, we shut down for about 4 years, and at both sites, we removed all the detector components and put in new, better quality detectors. And then by 2015, we were ready to start observing, our first observing run with the second generation advanced LIGO detector. Now, Virgo wasn't online yet. We expect that they'll join on in our second observation run this year, but they did help us analyze the data. So we had 2 detectors running. And on the 3rd day of quiet running, just the 3rd day, in both detectors, this beautiful signal developed. In top in orange is the signal in the Washington detector. And in blue, in the middle frame, is the signal in the Louisiana detector. And shown there are the data, the raw data, and a model that comes from numerical relativity. And what you see is this signal that's increasing in amplitude. It's getting louder. And it's increasing in frequency. The spacing between the peaks is getting shorter and shorter. That is what's called a chirp, a sort of whoop, which is really indicative that you have some sort of merger of dense objects like black holes or perhaps neutron stars. And if you shift them in time, it turns out Louisiana saw it first, Washington saw it second. If you shift the signal by 7 milliseconds, you see they essentially completely overlap, so the detectors are responding to the same astrophysical signal. On the vertical axis is strain. It's this tiny number. The actual change in our length of our arms for this signal was 10 to the minus 19 meters. That's 1/10,000th the size of a few thousandths the size of a proton. Incredibly tiny signal. If we were trying to measure the distance between here and the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, it'd be like watching it change by the width of a human hair. So it's a very, very precision-based experiment. And on the horizontal axis, you're seeing it's a 1/4 second worth of data. So in the last seconds of the system's life, those black holes are moving at over half the speed of light, and they merge and shed an incredible amount of gravitational wave energy. We're going to listen to the waveform next. You can actually hear it with your ears. It's in the audio band. If all of astronomy from the time 400 years ago when Galileo turned a telescope to the night sky is essentially looking at the universe, now we can listen to it. So let's hear these first sounds of space-time. You're going to hear the detector noise. That's kind of a rumble. And then you'll hear chirps. You'll hear repeated chirps. The chirps are first in the frequency band that the detector would hear it. That sounds like a whump. And then you'll hear it boosted by 200 hertz, 200 cycles, so you can better hear it, a kind of high-frequency chirp. So let's hear it. That sounds great on your speakers. So this was the first gravitational wave event that was directly detected by humans. And in the process, 3 times the mass of the sun were converted into gravitational waves. That makes it the most, except for the Big Bang, this is the most powerful astronomical event ever witnessed by humans. And none of it comes out in light. It comes out in deformations in the shape of space, not light at all. It's completely dark. So you really need gravitational wave detectors to find this particular source. On the day on Christmas night, so December 26th in GMT, we got our second gravitational wave event. So you're going to hear next a comparison of the 2 gravitational wave events. And you'll hear that these black holes are a little lighter, so they spend more time in our detector, and they chirp up to higher frequencies. So you're going to hear the comparison now. So you can hear the difference. Those heavier black holes merge at lower frequencies, and they make more of a thump in the detector. So this is a GeekPark. So being geeks, we probably can get some street cred if we change the ringtone on our cell phones to include these chirps, so like this. You can do that. You can get your ringtone at LIGO.org at the multimedia page if you want to change your phone. Here's a model now by the SXS collaboration of these first 2 black holes revolving around each other and merging. The simulation is intended to show the effect on space, the deformations in space that are formed by first the individual black holes. Those are the two pits in the plane, shown in green and yellow and red, where the space curvature is really strong. And you can also see at the bottom this blue trace moving along. So you're seeing that chirp waveform that we could see in the data as it progressively gets closer and closer to the merger, the point at which you form a new black hole. A new black hole is born. And then it rings down like a bell. Here, the movie slows, and the point at which the black holes merge. This is really not just the first detection of gravitational waves. It's the first really direct detection of black holes, the first detection of binary black holes, the first merger, showing that merger happens in the lifetime of the universe. And you can see in pink and blue this signal of gravitational waves being sent out into the universe, and finally, 1.3 billion years later, passing through the Earth on September 14th and making our interferometer detector arms shudder just a tiny bit. So where are we going? It's good to have this first detection of gravitational waves. It's important to have the first detection. But far more important to that is to use them to learn about the universe, to learn about objects like black holes and neutron stars and the Big Bang. So, for example here, we want to find in future observation runs these different types of objects, not just binary black holes. We started our second observation run on November 30th, and I'm pleased to say this is the first time ever that I can say we're going into that run knowing we've got a guaranteed source. We're going to find more binary black holes. But we also want to find on the left colliding neutron stars, 2 neutron stars, or perhaps 1 neutron star and 1 black hole that merge to find a black hole. If you have neutron stars, that's matter. Black holes don't have any matter. They're just warpages in space-time. If 2 neutron stars collide, then they'll give off gamma rays, and people will follow up with electromagnetic telescopes, space-based electromagnetic telescopes, and we'll learn more about the universe that way. Or exploding stars, supernova, the death of a star. You can't peer into the core of a supernova with light because it's all obscured by matter on the way out. But gravitational waves will stream freely. So we'll learn about exploding stars in the process. The Big Bang, we'll probably not see the Big Bang source of gravitational waves with the current generation of space-based detectors, ground-based detectors rather. It's probably something for space-based detectors in the future. It's a very weak source. And then lastly, spinning neutron stars in our galaxy. We'll learn about extreme nuclear matter through spinning pulsars and neutron star mergers. So there's a host of physics and astrophysics that we want to do with gravitational waves. We want to exploit them and learn from them. And we might get a complete surprise, something that isn't predicted by any theorist yet. And that would be an important and interesting and fascinating thing to happen. This is the location on the sky for our first event. Based on the time of arrival, kind of like your ears when you hear a clap or a snap, you hear it through one ear first and then secondly in the second ear. So that gives you some idea of where the sound came from. Gravitational waves are like that. Depending on what direction in the sky they hit one detector than the other, we can put a location in the sky for this source. And you see that's a big area for electromagnetic astronomers. The future of astronomy is this. We will find gravitational waves, and we will alert electromagnetic astronomers. And they'll follow up in the sky location that we point to them, and they'll find in gamma rays, or radio waves, or visible light, that same event. And we'll learn more about these objects through multi-messenger astronomy. It's really an astronomy of the future, a growth field. Here's the existing array around the world that's going to do this. There's LIGO in the United States. There's GEO in Germany, which is a high-frequency detector, part of the LIGO scientific collaboration. There's Virgo, which will come online this year and join us in our second observation run. There's Kagra in Japan, which will join in a couple of years. And there's LIGO India, which will join after that. So there's a real opportunity. There's an opportunity. There's scientists in China who are thinking now about potentially building an interferometer here. And that's an important thing that should be done. This is an opportunity. You have 400 years ago, Galileo pointed a telescope at the night sky and generated this field of electromagnetic astronomy. And people built better telescopes, better and better telescopes. Now you have gravitational wave detectors just making their first detections. It's time that you can jump in and make these gravitational wave detectors better, more sensitive, and ultimately do things like map out every binary black hole merger in the universe. That's a possible thing to do. These laser interferometers aren't the only type of gravitational wave detector you can make. In different frequency bands of gravitational waves, you can do things like, from left to right, a space-based detector. There are plans for space-based detectors for lower frequency detectors that will be built. There are pulsar timing arrays that look for pulsars and look for the effect of gravitational wave on the radio waves coming from pulsars in our galaxy. And at the very low frequency, just 8 oscillations in the lifetime of the universe, there's detectors at the South Pole that look for something called the polarization in the light from the Big Bang. And all of these detectors, at some point, I'm certain, will find gravitational waves in these different frequency bands, and we'll learn more about the basic constituents of the universe, of the nature of black holes, of the nature of the expansion of the universe, cosmology, and so forth. So we have our first detections, and this is a good thing. But really what we want to do is develop the field of gravitational wave astronomy. And its importance is clear. If all of modern astronomy to date is like looking at the universe, gravitational waves are, in a sense, like listening to the universe. So we apply a different sense. So that's the real motivation here, is to apply a new sense to the universe and learn about it in the process. Thanks very much.